My name is Joe Woodham from Tory. Welcome to our vlog series on all things design. Today I'm speaking with Navi McEnery. Starting as a motion designer for McCann Digital in Israel, she found her first major role at Viber, a communications platform with over 200 million daily active users. Navi began as an iOS designer before becoming a design leader, overseeing all global touchpoints and platforms. In 2017, Navi moved to Australia, leading design teams across diverse industries, including health, education, and employment. She's passionate about discovering and nurturing talent. Navi thrives on technology and innovation and enhancing the human experience. Navi, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Well, we may as well jump straight into it. Obviously, you've had an interesting career across different countries. Tell us about your journey as a designer.
My journey. You can probably trace that choice of my career all the way back to, unsurprisingly, parents. My mom is an educator. My dad is a hardware engineer. So when you think about educators, obviously they focus on nurturing people, and my dad focuses on solving problem with technology. So as I was studying for my bachelor's in communications and management, I took an Adobe Flash course just for the fun of it. At the time, they called it a multimedia course. Crazy, hey?
No,
And yeah, and I loved it. It was lots of fun. So I came out of uni, and basically it was the only tool that I knew out of uni, and I used it. I used it to find my first gig. I basically did a bit of a barter. I went to a little studio. I told the studio manager, I will create all these animated assets for you with my little knowledge of that program, and you will teach me Photoshop. And he took it. He took the bait. He's like, yay, let's get you on board. So I started doing that. He taught me Photoshop. I did quite a lot of manuals, tutorials kind of after work hours, and taught myself the tools. Um, so that was pretty much kind of my first gig in design. I started getting different types of clients coming in. It was basically like an agency type, so we got different types of clients, different industries. As time went by, the complexity obviously went up, and longer processes, bigger clients. So kind of moved a little, slowly more into that UI space and websites and applications. Um, so yeah, I still remember, when I was doing that first gig, some of the compliments that I received from more senior designers. One of the senior designers used to just look at my, one of those hovering directors would look into my screen and would be like, that's pretty good for someone who didn't go through design school. And I remember at the time, I found it so triggering. Now it's a bit of a giggle. It's like, yeah, who cares?
Who's gone to design school these days? Everyone's gone through General Assembly.
For visual design, right? Because that's kind of that when you think of the basic of understanding space and type and yeah, for those things, I guess that I just yeah I taught myself that. Um, yeah, so but basically my first big move I think was after that because I did quite a few years of client work, but the biggest step for my career was being pulled into an in-house team. So a product manager that worked with me in that agency pulled me into Viber. Viber, had at the time a really small in-house team. They brought me in to do their iOS app. Massive global exposure. When you think of a lot of people, I think in Australia don't know Viber because it really plays in South America and some of the Eastern European countries, but it's really big. We're talking, around that 200 million plus active users daily. So it's a massive exposure, and iOS was their flagship app. So I kind of grew with the team. And at that time, I think that the biggest accomplishment was redesigning the app from scratch. We were at that time moving from, the bulky style to that flat UI. I needed to work with developers remotely and redo all the screens from scratch, rethink all of the experiences. And that was, I guess, the biggest accomplishment that I really enjoyed doing at that time.
Very
Yeah,
cool. That is a lot of active use. So
yeah, yeah, pretty big.
No pressure. Well, that kind of leads on to the next question, actually. Obviously, it sounds like your career into leadership was at Viber. Can you tell us what inspired you to take that move into leadership? It's very easy to sort of just get stuck in the hands-on side of things and then moving into leadership. What made you want to take that leap?
Um, well, I redesigned the app, as I mentioned, and I finished that gig. And I
Yep.
remember knocking on my manager's door and saying, "What next? I've finished this challenge. Give me something else. What's the next challenge?" And he's like, "Navi, have you considered people leadership?" And until he said that, it actually didn't come to mind. But the reality for me at that time is that I had four more designers in the team. Some were there before my time. But because I redesigned the iOS app and I created a new design language, I then oversaw how that was addressed for the other platforms and helped the other designers in the team to take that and convert that to what would be an Android style or a desktop style. And I did that naturally. I was basically playing a bit of a mentor role without noticing. And I think he saw it in the background. He's like, "Hey, why don't we just level you up and put you as the manager?" And it creeped me out big time because they're all my friends. And I was like, "What?" Talking about imposter syndrome, like I was an imposter, I didn't have the syndrome. I was literally like, what type of skills do I have to actually step up and lead the team? And he said, "It'll be okay. I'll guide you. It'll be okay." And yeah, I basically became their manager overnight, with zero leadership skills. But I think my manager saw in me at that time something that I'm only understanding today is, I guess, in my ability to bring people together and motivate them and get them really excited, activate them towards a cause. And I think I had that kind of early on.
It's a daunting step going for something that like a specialist skill as a designer into a leadership role, which is very untangible. You can't sometimes you don't know when you're doing well or not doing well. Was there any advice that your manager at that point gave you that sort of really helped you on that journey, or is there anything that sticks out in your journey to become a leader that you were given?
Um, I think more practically at that time, because there were quite a lot of people that were promoted for those team lead roles. We were sent to a course and we got some skills. We got a little toolkit that we could use at that time. Um, so that was really handy. But I think if I need to think through kind of a good piece of advice that I received is actually not from a manager, but it's actually Jordan Peterson. So do you know Jordan Peterson? I
Absolutely.
know it's
Yes.
controversial, so I'll keep that to the side for now. But I remember seeing a video on YouTube a few years back from Jordan Peterson, and he talked about the fact that managers sometimes waste or spend too much time on low performance. And he said, if you take all that energy and the time and put it on your high performers, you're going to achieve greatness. So he's like, stop spending time with your low performers. And I remember listening to that at the time and saying, okay, well, that's not very feasible for me. I can't really, as a manager, ignore low performers, right? Like you kind of need to deal with that. But I took it up a notch.
Yep.
And what I actually pulled out of it is, I guess, the focus on strengths rather than weakness. So at an individual level, if you look at your employees and you spend way too much trying to get them to do what they cannot do so successfully, don't take all that energy and effort in actually elevating what they do well and make that work for you. And I think I took that and built upon that throughout the years as a leader. And one of the best frameworks that I was exposed to, with the help of SAKE, I need to give them credit, was the Clifton Strengths framework by Gallup. And it basically is, I don't know if you've heard of it. I'm happy to talk through it quickly if you're interested, but it's basically like a framework that
Yeah.
helps attach strengths to people. It's a self-assessment tool, but I've been using that to lead individuals and teams, and it resonates with a lot of people. So that, yeah, that's been. Would you like me to talk through that? Do you know the Clifton Strengths?
I don't. So yes, I would.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll try to make that short so I don't chew your head off completely. Clifton Strengths is basically a self-assessment tool, and you go online to Gallup and you basically answer, I think they have like 70 plus statements. And at the end of it, you get a report, and it's a list of 34 strengths from top to bottom. And they really encourage you to look at mostly your top five and your top 10. Now, what it says is the report for itself helps you understand why you behave the way that you behave. And it also points out not only your strengths, but your blind spots. And I guess the idea behind Clifton Strengths is what is your points of failure in life, in relationships, at work, is not necessarily your weaknesses, but actually when you dial up your strengths too much. And I'll give you a quick example. Okay. So I'm an achiever. I like to get stuff done. I get a lot of satisfaction by looking at a list of stuff and ticking them off and say, yep, nailed it. Like if I spent half of the afternoon paying my bills and doing all the admin work, I'd be so happy beyond words. Or some people would be like, ugh, take that away from me, right? So I'm an achiever. And that's a strength because obviously in an organization that values things being done, it's awesome. But there's a blind spot that comes with that. The blind spot is that I may, as a leader, I guess, expect other people around me and below to be, I guess, to behave the same way and to have perhaps the same level of urgency to wrap up on tasks and to have that enjoyment of getting stuff done, which means that I can put pressure on people below me if I'm not aware of it. If I don't have an open communication channel with them and saying, I want to be looped back. I don't have any pressure, but this is just something that I'd love to be for you to do. Yeah, so I think that's part of that understanding and using Clifton Strengths as an individual and as a team helps you understand yourself and why you operate the way that you do. But most importantly, it helps create a shared language. So it helps you collaborate with other people. It helps you pair with different people on projects. So, for example, there's the strategic thinkers, there are the executioners, there are different themes across Clifton Strengths. So I've used that with teams as a way to pair, as a way to carve out career development for people. So it's been really interesting to work with that and facilitate teams to use that as well.
That's really cool. Do you every team member that you have on your team, will you get them to do that assessment?
Yeah, it's basically part of the onboarding and say, hey, welcome. There's a code. Go on the website, get your report ready, put it in here. There's a spreadsheet basically they can put the results in there and actually immediately see how their team members assess themselves as well. So they get that immediate team view. And every so often we have those facilitated workshops with the team so people get the opportunity to talk about it and talk about the blind spots and make sure that we're aware and collectively working to elevate those strengths and understand the blind spot. A really interesting one, by the way, and I find that really interesting because I've done it with a few design teams throughout the years. There is a theme and it's consistent. 3 design teams that I've led so far had a strength called relator at the top. Now, what that means as a design team, it explains a lot of things in the behavior of a design team, but what relator means is designers, if there's that majority of people at relator, they really enjoy relating to other people, right? So they enjoy really good conversations. They don't love the small talk. They love connecting on an emotional level and they stick together, right? And you know how there's this thing about like, oh, designers, they always kind of hang together and how do I get in and how do I be part of that? That comes from relator because they form this really strong bond that from the outside, people don't know how to get in. So actually bringing the team together and saying, hey, there's this relator strength that is really common and popular for most of us in the team. It means that there is a blind spot for us. And we need to be aware that if we take a lot of time to form those relationships internally, we might be excluding people from outside of the design team, and we're missing opportunities, not social opportunities so much, but opportunities to have impact with design. Because you know how designers and design leaders always talk about having more impact and being able to have a seat at the table. So much of that comes from us not including people in the conversations, not allowing people to sit in our brains and understand what we're interested in and how we're thinking. That's part of that. It kind of starts from that behavioral aspect.
Now, my next question was actually what skills and attributes make a great designer. But if you're using the Clifton Strengths framework, can you make everyone a great designer?
It's not an all size fits one, all one size fits all. Sorry. Yes,
Yeah, no,
English
that's right.
we're practicing. Yeah, I think there is Clifton Strength says that we are not creating one great person, is we are highlighting the good in each individual, and then bringing them together as a team would create that unified strength. Um, and but pulling it out of Clifton Strength at the moment is it's still like to define what a great designer is almost impossible, because I think it also is related to the environment that they operate in, right? And the company that they're joining. So if someone's
Agreed.
joining a startup, they need to be adaptable because there's going to be a lot of change. But if someone's joining a bank that's been there for 30 years, it's not about adapting. It's actually being able to challenge the status quo because maybe the culture is quite stagnant and they're not generating a lot of change and excitement. So it's a lot to do with the environment. And that's from a soft skill perspective, but same goes for hard skill, right? If I'm hiring a designer for Atlassian and Atlassian has a very well established design system, I don't need a lot of designers that have really great UI skills. I don't need that. I can look for designers that are stronger in UX, stronger in research, and that's okay. So I think again, there is no great. It really does depend on the environment and the needs. I will, however, say that when I hire, there are two things that I prefer not to compromise on when it comes to a soft skill, and that's kindness and humility, because I've seen what happens when people have quite a lot of experience and knowledge, but don't treat the people around them with humility, and it can really affect that mutual growth. So that's I don't know if that's a great designer or just a great human, but that's something that I prefer not to compromise over.
I think Telstra call them as rock star designers, and they've made a policy not to hire rock star designers because it throws the status quo off in the team and it doesn't work well. Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Mm.
Um, Oh, it's really good. I think what you pointed out there is a designer going into a corporate environment or a designer going to startups. It doesn't matter. Like there is so many like different nuances there that one won't fit the other. And when we're working, definitely trying to find someone that fits into a corporate environment and understands stakeholder management is very different to trying to plug someone in who's an incredible designer into a small to medium sized business because it's just very, very different operating systems.
Yeah, 100%.
But that leads me on to my final question. Um, Designs, obviously, there's been a lot happening over the last couple of years with design and AI now. So, is there any trends that you're keeping an eye on in the design space at the moment, or you're excited about?
Um, I'm not sure excitement is the word, but AI is there, right? And it's the obvious one. And it's happening. It's hitting obviously all industries, including design. I was browsing the Figma community the other day, and the amount of plugins that were there toying with AI with the intention of just keeping you on the tool is crazy, right? They're not all strong tools, but they're there. And the more they're created, the more that we'll probably end up with really great tools. But I think it's less about the tooling right now, but it's more about the products that we design for, as I'm seeing it, because we're going to see a change in user habits. right? I'll give you an example, and it's a really current one. Let's say I'm a designer that works for Seek, and I design the process in which candidates can put their CV together, right? If I do that and I ignore the fact that there is this massive trend for people that are applying for jobs, and I know because I've been in that environment now, that they're using ChatGPT, and I'm ignoring that as a designer, then I failed to basic because it's about a new habit and a new need that I'm now not servicing. So it's understanding the habits from a research and an early discovery perspective that needs to now inform my design. So we can't sit in silo anymore. We have to really open our eyes and understand how the industry is really changing. Um, and I think it's weird to call it a trend, but what I'm seeing also now is we're kind of moving away from specialization when it comes to the job market. So, their design leadership and centralized teams and research operations, all these kind of functions are being pared back substantially. And the market is now looking for a bit of a generalist designer, right? That can wear a few hats. Someone who could um, design and run research and set design strategy and form small teams. And that's a lot. And there is an advantage there for people that are looking for jobs because there is an opportunity to upskill and expand and become more rounded, which is a good opportunity. But obviously, there's a risk for quality. Um, and AI can't help with that yet with quality.
Very true.
Yeah. So we'll see where we
And
go.
I definitely noticed that trend. I don't think there's many people that are now titled a UI designer or a UX designer. It is now product designer, and each organization's so different when they're looking for a product designer. They're like, oh, this person needs 95% UX and 5% UI. I'm like, why don't you just call it a UX design? But yeah, it is the trend of product design, and everyone has to do a bit of everything. And now, obviously, doing a bit of research as well. But
Yeah.
there still will be the need for specialization. It just depends maybe on the organization and the project that they're working on.
Mm.
Navi, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Now, you've actually recently finished up with Sears, so you're on the market. Just maybe a good plug for you. Like, what's next for you? Have you thought about what type of role you're going to be looking for next, or organization you want to join? It's probably a leadership role, I imagine, but what type of organization are you looking for?
It's a good question because I was just about to say it's not about the role, it's the organization. I'm looking for a people first organization. And you know what? I think when I moved to Australia, I joined Seek, and because it was my first employer, I took them for granted in a way, and I actually didn't know how much they are different from other companies. And Seek is a really good example of an employer first or a people first company, and it comes through everything that they do. It's part of their DNA, and I really appreciate that. So that would be something. If it's not the product, then at least it's the culture. It comes from executive leadership, comes from HR, a role that can put people in the center of everything that we do would be critical for me, and that's how I'm going to judge my next opportunity.
Cool. Well, I have spoken to several of your current team at SIA, and they speak so highly of you from a leadership perspective, and they love, I guess, working with you. So I'm sure
Oh,
anyone to snag you up will be very lucky.
thank
Um,
you. Really
just if
kind.
anyone's got any questions or anything like that, what's the best way for them to contact you? Just reach out via LinkedIn or email. What's easiest for
Yeah,
you?
LinkedIn is awesome. I'm there.